Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope, a podcast about business, well-being and chocolate.
Hello and welcome to our latest episode of Hope and Patience. It's wonderful to have you here. I hope you had a fab Christmas and happy 2021. If you're new to the show and enjoying the recent episodes, don't forget to dip into the archives. We've had some amazing guests, all with something to share with you. Today we are off exploring what it's like to be at the helm of an award-winning family-owned organic dairy and farming business. Their impressive accomplishments include a partnership with farmer-owned Arla, one of the largest dairy suppliers, winning not one but 3 of the highly sought-after Queen's Awards, and have a multi-million-pound turnover to match. With their strong value system and commitment to the environment, animal husbandry and support to their local communities, they're an example of an authentic business which has achieved great heights but remained fully earthed to its roots. Our guest today is the visionary Tim Mead, chairman of Yeo Valley Family Farms. Tim is the son of pioneers, the husband and wife duo, Mary and the late Roger Mead, who began their entrepreneurial journey back in the 1960s with a tea room, pick your own fruit, and making yoghurt with leftover milk from the clotted cream which they sold locally. Their brand has extended to Yeo Valley restaurants, Yeo Gardens and the canteen, ice cream, the music and food festival Valley Fest, and finally Yeo Valley Associates, where they help small businesses. Their charitable arm includes supporting FarmLink, Keep for Life, Yokens and much more. So on with introducing our guest, and to hear their story, welcome to H&P, Tim.
Good morning.
Tim, would you be able to share the story with us about how Yeo Valley came to be what it is today?
Absolutely. My parents got married when they were quite young, and they're about sort of 20 and 21. And my father was from a farming family based probably only about 8 miles from where we are. And at the age of 22 and 23, they decided they wanted to farm on their own. So they went off and secured a mortgage from the NFU and bought a dairy farm at Holt Farm, which lies on the edge of Blagdon Lake, which is in the Yeo Valley. And I guess for the first 5 or 6 years of their married life, they basically set about trying to turn the farm into something that would be able to support them and their family. And it became pretty apparent, I think, to my father that if he wanted to remain a dairy farmer, he'd have to diversify and try and add value to the products that he was producing, which was namely milk. So, around sort of 1970, he started looking into various different ideas of products that he could make from either, so they were traditional mixed dairy farmers. So they had cows, they had sheep, they had beef, they had some corn. And basically he sort of looked at all of the things that were being produced on the farm and decided that he was going to become a yogurt maker. And I've become a yogurt maker's son. So there is a rest of a ditty to that, but I'll leave that up to everybody to determine what that could be. So I think in the last 50 years, there's 150,000 dairy farmers who are no longer dairy farmers in this country.
Wow.
We've shrunk down to about something like 8 to 10,000 dairy farmers in Britain now. And all of those farms over the last 50 years have all got bigger. So effectively, we produce the same amount of milk as we did 50 years ago as a country, but on every dairy farm, there's really 5 times more cows, and the cows produce about twice as much milk. So anybody who's good at their maths will be able to work out that produces the same amount of milk.
So, Tim, how did your parents take it? How did your mum and dad take it from being purely Holt Farm into what Yeo Valley became in the 90s when you took it on from after your dad's tragic accident?
So basically blood, sweat and milk, I think is very good. There's no sort of, when you're starting a small business, there's not people who can help you out because you can't afford, the consultants, or you can't afford the advice. You've basically intrinsically in people, there are some people are entrepreneurs, and I don't see myself as an entrepreneur, but my father was definitely an entrepreneur. He would, he worked out the idea, and then he worked out how to build a factory, how to get vans on the road to take the product where it was going to do, how to make the product. And it really comes from a large sense of, energy and passion in what you're doing and determination. And also, in a lot of cases, it comes out of pure necessity from, wanting to be able, if the option of not making a success of this farm that my parents moved to was that they would have to sell the farm and move somewhere else, then there is a huge amount of stick as well as the carrot of potentially trying to, create a business that can provide for you and your family in a way that you'd like.
And so in the 90s, how did you develop the business? They bought the farm next door, is that right? And then how did it grow between the early days and the sort of late 1990s, early 2000s?
I mean, I think people look at our business now and go, well, you're one of the only sort of private family businesses with brand in the top 100 UK brands and things like that. And they look at us and go, well, you're huge. But it's been a really slow and steady process where, we intend to be here for a very long time. And you make your decisions that means that you don't risk too much. So you become vulnerable and therefore have to sell out or go bust or whatever happens. It's been a slow and steady process. But it's also mirrored over that sort of 40 years what's happened in the rest of industry. I mean, there used to be 40 or 50 large people that you could sell your products to. There used to be sort of 20 or 30 chains of supermarkets. Now 80% goes through the top 4 or something like that. So in those days, there were lots and lots of yogurt makers. There were lots and lots of retailers, and things were done on a sort of smaller scale. What we've managed to do is be the last man standing in terms of being a private yogurt making business. So effectively, we've kept our head down, not taken too many risks, and are still in the race.
Very much in the race. Did you both imagine that it was going to grow as big as it did? And also to have the skill set to create it?
I guess at this point I have to reveal that I'm a chartered accountant.
Oh, are you?
And that I possibly am not the out-and-out entrepreneur that my father was. So my father's ability to, through sheer energy and determination and strength, to take an idea and, against all odds, make it actually happen. My early career was failing to go to university due to sort of stupidity and messing around at school. Then I had to pay the price because, if you couldn't have a degree, chartered accountancy was something that you could do without a degree, but still at the end of it was probably better than a degree. So I did my 4 years training as a chartered accountant. That's not to say that accountants know everything, but as an accountant being involved in a family business, you just know where you are. You know the relationship between profit and cash. You know long-term investments. You know how to structure things to be effective. And so it gave you a certain confidence that to allow you to run the business in a way that possibly you wouldn't if you just didn't have that sort of complete knowledge of your financial situation.
That must have been a real asset for you to be a numbers man, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the absolute key in our business was to surround yourself with people who are good at their job. So, at the age of 25, when I sort of really took over the business, I managed to get people involved and passionate about the business. And all of us spent a good 25 years basically fulfilling the roles that we had within the business, whether it was the engineering or the technical or the sales or the production or the operations side. We had some really good people who shared in the vision of what we were trying to achieve, and you just get stuck in and opportunities come along and you measure them up and then you potentially just go for them, really. It's not very sophisticated.
Do you think that the vision has changed significantly from your father's original plans, or would you say that you just sort of implemented them and then sort of massaged them, grew them?
He was what I call a nagsman. He was exceedingly good at riding horses. And I think the analogy is that it's horses for courses. So his ability to be an entrepreneur and then my ability to take something that was, you sort of knew roughly where you were going and then sort of fine tune it. So he probably wouldn't be interested in particularly the running of a business that has got more structure than he would have enjoyed. So he was sort of, energetic and running a business with, 1,800 people. You need huge amounts of structure and discipline and stuff like that. He was more entrepreneurial and maverick. So I think it's horses for courses.
You mentioned that you're a custodian of the land, and your family have been farming for over 500 years in Somerset and I think 50 years in Yeo Valley. Do you see your children taking over the mantle like you did? Did you feel obligated to take it on? And would your children feel obligated to take it on?
I think it's difficult, isn't it? So, I was 25 when my father unfortunately died in an accident on the farm. And that basically puts a massive, great rocket up you. On the basis that the responsibility of the custodianship of handing it on to another generation or to looking after the generation that was there, like my sisters and my mother. So suddenly that responsibility sort of suddenly became 100% and truly mine. Whether that is something that wants to be passed on to my children will be up to my children. You want them to go and do their own thing. You want them to express themselves and to be involved in things. But eventually you want them to get enough life skills and life knowledge to be the custodian of something that, I think is really quite important.
Absolutely. How has it affected dairy farmers with the trend to replace milk with plant-based milk? Especially, I think the plant-based milk is especially popular, isn't it, with the younger generations? Has that affected Yeo Valley at all?
If you look at the trends around the world, there's a whole thing about where do the calories of your food come from? And since the Second World War, the vast majority of calories have come from artificial fertilizer, synthetic chemicals and things like that. And that's just the way it is. We came out of the Second World War. There was rationing in Europe. All the nitrogen factories that were producing nitrogen for all the armaments and explosives for the war stopped making gunpowder and explosives. And that was able to make nitrogen fertilizer, which basically got us out of a situation that we were, had food rationing across most of Europe. The unfortunate thing is that has just continued, and we've ended up farming in a way where, there were two revolutions. There was the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. So industrial agriculture doesn't sit comfortably with me. So the ability to go and produce food in an agricultural way, where you're building the fertility by rotating crops and things like that, is 100% for me the correct way to go. So when people say we need to stop eating all this mass-produced meat, I 100% totally agree with them. I think producing mass-produced meat is pork and chicken is completely reliant on producing mass-produced grain, and mass-produced grain comes from artificial fertilizers, and therefore the energy for all that comes from oil. So that is totally, in my opinion, as a supporter of organic regenerative farming, is completely the wrong way to go. When you get to plant milks, the statement that says that we all need to eat a more plant-based diet, I believe is 100% correct. Because I believe eating, industrial farm chicken and pork at huge quantities is one of the sort of major problems. But plant milks don't fall into the category of necessarily the right way. So there was recently the Peter Melchett Memorial Lecture, which I think the title was Ultra-Processed Foods, How It's Stolen a Generation. And in France, they consume 15% of ultra-processed food. And in the UK, we consume 55% of ultra-processed food. So when somebody says eat a plant-based diet, I look at sprouts or cabbages or carrots or apples or pears or things that we can grow in sort of Northern Europe. What I don't look at is, so plant-based milks are probably one of the most ultra-processed foods that you possibly can have. So you take 2 almonds, you put it into a litre of water, you smack it into lots of packaging, you ship it wherever around the world, and then you put it into refrigeration, even though it doesn't need it. And then you claim that it's a way of helping the environment, which to me is totally and utterly sort of outrageous. And then if you look at all the companies who are behind plant-based foods, I think the average size of these companies are, I don't know, £50 billion or whatever. If you look at the other products they produce, sort of fizzy drinks and all that sort of stuff, all the main culprits of the sugar issues with obesity and everything like that of providing those products to consumers are right and truly behind the massive growth of plant milks. So I don't want to be a moany, whingy dairy farmer, but I love carrots. I love sprouts. I love plants. I like plant-based food, but I think it is a complete misnomer to make out that plant-based milks are the solution, when basically they're being produced by monoculture products all around the world, when the reality of regenerative organic dairy produced products are that, from a localized area in Northern Europe, we've got plenty of land that can produce lots of grass, and cows are really, really good at reducing and converting grass into nutritious food. So I think you've got to look at the regionalisation of food production across the world. Soya, almonds, they're not great for being grown in the UK, whereas we got lots of grass. And the answer to the grass-based thing is that as regenerative farmers, we lock up more carbon in our 2,000 acres than the output is accountable for the production of the milk. So it is more than possible to farm in a way to reverse climate change and produce healthy and nutritious food.
I mean, some of the things that you're doing in your farms is incredible, with the elephant grass for biofuel. And then also I was reading that your milk bottling plant runs off solar power, which was, I think, one of the reasons why you won one of your many Queen's Awards. But tell us a little bit about that, Tim, what you're doing on the sustainability side.
I think sustainability and eco-friendly and carbon zero, biodiversity is another one that people chuck out there, and they say, well, we're all for biodiversity, but what does biodiversity mean? Then you got new phrases like bioabundance. There's no point in having one butterfly. You need lots of butterflies. So biodiversity means the number of species, and bioabundance means how many of those that you've actually got. And what everybody does is they focus above the ground. They focus, the nice stuff, the lions, the hares, the owls, the bumblebees, all of that lovely, which is beautiful. I mean, I love all of them. But as organic farmers, it all starts below the ground. It's about the health of your soil. It's about the microbes in the soil. It's the insects. It's the living bits of the soil. Because if you don't get that right, then nothing above the soil will survive. And so this whole focusing on, the lovely, fluffy bunnies and bits and pieces is all great. But as an organic farmer, I just wish that people would how do you make soil sexy? I mean, how do you explain to people that soil is the answer to reversing climate change? Soil is the answer to producing healthy food. Soil is the answer to, stopping floods and climate change and all those sorts of things. And it's a really tough ask. And, if there's one thing that we're going to do as a business for the next 10 years is to seek out the holy grail of how do we allow people to realize that if everything below ground is done properly, then everything above ground will follow and be as healthy as it possibly can be.
In a way, it's a bit like looking after oneself, because if you look after the internal workings of your body, then externally you should be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't quite get the linkage between, so Rudolf Steiner, his whole philosophy was based around how the quality of food produced from the quality of soil relates to the health of a nation. There's huge studies that say that, kids in cities are suffering asthma is like a rising trend because people aren't getting dirty and muddy. And, so the relationship between the microbes in the soil and the microbes that would be on your food and what we're actually ingesting as in a modern world is causing all sorts of health problems. And therefore, soil is a living, breathing thing that has a relationship with the plants and the animals above.
And sadly, too much cement has been plastered on it. Well, that's me living in a city. I look at it and I now, especially after the first lockdown, I just thought, wow, all these roads, okay, they're tarmac, but yeah, soil is the essence, really, isn't it? So, Tim, on the packaging side of things, what are you up to with trying to get that all recyclable?
We have a very simple target with any plastic that we use to package products, and there is a dilemma between packaging things in a way that means that there is less waste and that they can get to the consumer, etc., etc. But what our target is to ensure that all of the plastic that we eventually have within our business is made from 100% recycled, and it is 100% recyclable. So if you create these loops of products, then that is the most efficient, low carbon way of getting food from A to B in bits and pieces. I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have just issued a huge report out that basically explains all of the sort of the loop systems that are happening now within the sort of the packaging world.
So, Tim, I am a business mentor for the Open the Gate programme, which is part of Find Sell Work. And my role as a business mentor is to mentor ex-offenders to try and support them to find a job when they have come out of prison. And I heard the inspirational story on BBC Radio 4 Saturday Live with the Reverend Richard Cole about Liam, and the chance that you gave him through Eva Hamilton's Key for Life. So I think Sarah, your wife, was involved in this, but would you tell us a bit more about Liam's story and how you have given him an opportunity that seems to have got him right back on the straight and narrow and really sort of reaping the rewards as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Key for Life program basically focuses on, I guess, guys between the age of 18 and 25 who've got themselves into trouble and have been allocated a prison cell for a period of time. And it's how, when they come out of that, do you break the cycle of reoffending? And I think the reoffend, I'm not quite sure what the numbers are, but it's like a 70 or 80% reoffending rate.
High, yeah.
And what is it that you can do, and how do you mentor those people so that they realise that actually there are other options? And it's all very well for me to say there are other options, but when you find yourself in the desperate states that a lot of people find themselves, the option of getting yourself into trouble is something that sometimes is just too big to avoid, because it's about hunger, it's about it's looking after your family, it's looking after your your siblings, etc., etc. So I think the simple program is that if you take somebody who has experienced an awful lot of that for a long part of their life and they've got themselves into trouble, then the mentoring part of that is basically allowing you to intervene in situations whereby they would not basically continue in their employment or wherever they found themselves. So the transgressions that you will find potentially means that if somebody doesn't turn up 3 days out of 5 or whatever, it might be for reasons, and what you've got to do is sort of override the rules of normal life, knowing that you're trying to nudge them to a place where eventually they then operate in a way that fits society's norm, really. Liam is great, but I mean, when he was first working for us, because he might have needed to sort things out, or it hadn't mattered to him in the past, whether it's attendance or behaviour or whatever it was. And then slowly the whole mentoring, and the mentoring is not just my wife, but Sarah's done an awful lot. It's, you pick the people that they are working with, because you want everybody to be an influence. And eventually, if the group of people that you're working in and socializing in and whatever have got values and thoughts and ideas, you sort of tend to begin to take those on yourself. And Liam has done that, remarkably well.
So, Tim, who or what has been the greatest influence, would you say?
Well, I think my parents have both been, my father, when he was alive, you learned he was a fun-loving, large character, cracked on, and just realised that, you could do stuff, that you could just get on and do stuff. And then my mother has also, for the last 30 years, has been, a guiding hand, as have all of my family, really, my wife, my sisters. Generally, you sort of get inspiration from people, don't you? And my mother is a very wise and clever lady, but she's also, she's also clever enough to know that, you've got to tell people just to get on with their own lives.
We probably should have had Mary on with you. I didn't think about that. And now I'm just sitting here thinking we should have done. What have you learnt about yourself from running the business or being involved in the business?
Well, I suppose I was a bit of a slow starter, really, at school. I was not particularly academic, mildly dyslexic. I think it's about being slow and steady, but also, there has got to be an edge. We have a sort of expression. It's like, well, is this one of those moments where we just got to kick the bloody door down? And what that means is if there's something on the other side of the door that you want, then sometimes, knocking politely ain't going to get it. Sometimes you just got to put your boot in and walk through. And that's just life. You can't avoid it. There'll be other people wanting what you want. And if you want it bad enough, sometimes you've just got to muscle up and go for what you want. And that's sort of not probably uncharacteristic of myself, I would think. I'd like to think. But, what I do know is that sometimes, when it gets tough or whatever, you just got to really knuckle down and do what's got to be done.
So that leads me to the question of what do you think has challenged you most so far?
I would think possibly marketing. If you look at the broad spectrum of stuff, okay, as dairy farmers, as the son of a dairy farmer, you know how to weld up a shit scraper, tractor or whatever, because you're doing it when you're 12 or 14 or whatever it is. So making things, installing boilers, building factories, as dairy farmers, you've got to keep your milk clean. So the whole technical side of making products is sort of ingrained. Buying things, farmers like a deal, and flogging stuff, you can get the sales angle. Some people just buzz off selling stuff, and for them the sale is everything. And therefore, within all of the disciplines of our business, whether it's technical, engineering, manufacturing, selling, whatever, accounting, it's like, it's facts. 1 and 1 is 2, and somebody says it's 3, then you don't believe them because it's not true. But with marketing, bloody hell, I mean, anybody could do what's right. And it's like, there's all these phrases, isn't there? Like, oh, well, 80% of the money's wasted because we don't know which bit's working. And, I mean, it is fluffy load of old,
It is fluffy, but the thing is that we all need it. I mean, I see it as just holding your finger up to the breeze and just sort of seeing where the wind's coming in from. Marketing is challenging. And I think nowadays everything moves so fast. You've got all the social media side of things that when you set up, and certainly when I had my chocolate business in the early days, we didn't have to do all that side of it, which it was more sort of sending chocolate bars off and hoping that you get a mention in a paper, which was a breeze compared to what happens now. Now, Tim, we are revving up for the chocolate break, which is always when I pep up. But we've got a quick fire round first of all. So optimist or pessimist?
Optimist.
Introvert, extrovert, or an ambivert, which is a mix?
A mix.
Perfectionist or non-perfectionist?
Severely perfectionist.
Early bird or night owl?
Definitely early bird.
Okay, so the chocolate break. Tim, have you got your chocolate of choice by your side?
I have.
So you tell us why that we're about to tuck into the crunchy bar.
Because it's not a lot of chocolate. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think most chocolate tastes a lot worse than it did 20 years ago.
Tim, that's not true.
Whether it's because I don't know. Okay, all of the standard brands. So because the crunchy is only covered in a coat of chocolate, you're basically getting the honeycomb, really, aren't you?
But I think you need to revisit some different chocolate brands, maybe.
I know that Lots
It's
of
upped
new
its game.
There are lots of new chocolate brands coming through. But, personally, I don't know. This is
Stick to the
awful.
original. But did you know, when I was researching this bar, it was originally launched in 1929 by J.S. Fry and Sons. And funnily enough, the other bar that was on the potential list that I rushed out to buy and hadn't eaten for years, so I was almost willing you to pick that, but you've picked this, the peppermint. Wasn't it the peppermint cream? That is also by J.S. Fry and Sons. So you must have been one of their sort of babies, I suppose.
Who were based in Bristol.
Ah, so
Probably.
local.
I knew somebody who worked there, and they probably used to bring home lots of free chocolate or something like that.
Okay, back to work, Tim. What are your thoughts on success and failure?
Well, I think if you do your best, that's all you can ask of people, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And different people's judgment of success and failure. So people look at our business and they go, "Oh, it's a really big business." 25 years ago, we set out to try and get 10% of all British dairy farmers to, become organic dairy farmers, just because we felt that from a community point of view, from a knowledge point of view, it would be a great thing. 25 years later, we're only halfway there. But so is 500 million litres a success, or is it a failure because we were, we were looking at trying to get 1 billion litres, or will the 1 billion litres be achieved within the next 10 years? I don't know.
Are you still after achieving the 1 billion litres?
Absolutely. We would love it if 1 in 10 dairy farms in Britain farmed to organic regenerative principles, because that would have an influence on all farming. It would be great. And so the Rodale Institute in America have just come out with a massive claim, which I think everybody's shooting them down on, is that if the world farmed in a regenerative organic way, then we could sequester all of the emissions of CO2 that we produce as a world, which is an amazingly large potential claim. And what we're going to do in our business is to try and encourage all of our supplier farmers, where at all possible, to adopt regenerative agriculture approaches and set about trying to reverse climate change. Whether we will, whether we don't, we'll know in 5 and 10 years' time when we measure the increases in soil carbon.
We had Tessa Clark from the Olio app on the show earlier on, and they are about redistributing food surplus. So that if you've got, and it's individuals doing it, so you might have 2 tins of tomatoes that you don't need, and so you put it on the app and your neighbour would think, I need those 2 tins of tomatoes. It's phenomenal. But they were saying that one of the biggest things contributing to climate change is food waste.
Well, I think food waste during the initial lockdown, so food waste, they reckon, is running at about 30% in the UK. Okay,
it's crazy.
Which is outrageous. But the more places that you can buy food, the higher the waste there will be. So when everybody was in the initial lockdown, they reckon that food waste reduced by 70%. So it went from 30% down to 10%, which is a phenomenal thing. And so in our house, we had 7 people, 7 days a week, having 3 meals, which is
that's a lot.
So 150 meals plus all the snacks in between. There were probably 200 meals being prepared in our house on a weekly basis. And therefore, was there ever a chance that anything was going to get wasted? No. Everything for the next day was eaten for breakfast, or, bubble and squeak, or, so you can see how that if everybody basically had all their meals at home, then 70% of all food waste would disappear completely.
Yeah. Okay. So back onto failure. So you were talking about success, and really that is the thing of getting more organic dairy farmers on board and producing your 1 billion litres. What are your thoughts on the word failure?
Yeah, there's lots of sort of management bits about you've got to fail a few times to learn a few lessons, or I don't really subscribe to that. I just think as long as you do your best, then it's not really regarded as failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on to your well-being, Tim. I found as a founder that I neglected my well-being. So I'm always interested to see what other founders do to look after themselves. How important is incorporating well-being into your day?
I guess, to be really honest, at the age of 50, I possibly hadn't been focused. You're so busy with work.
Yeah.
You're getting up at 4. So for the first 10 years, like you're getting up at 5 in the morning and going to bed at midnight, and that's all you're doing. Then you get, and then that continues for a period of time. You're driving all over the country. So at the age of 50, we sort of, when I realised I'd been doing my job for 25 years, and we started so I'm no longer, actively involved in the day-to-day management of the business, although I am chairman. We've gone through a transition in the last 5 years, where we've got, all the guys who worked with me for 25 years, we've all redeployed ourselves into different roles, etc., etc. Because you want you want 35-year-olds running around the country, driving up and down the motorway, flogging things to supermarkets and all that sort of stuff. There's only so long you can do that. So in a very small way, I sort of took up cycling, which is, your classic, mammal or whatever they call them. But we sort of do sort of mountain bike riding on the Mendips and around that area with a group of friends. So, so I'm relatively active, get outside. But like most people, probably drink too much, and possibly could eat less and do more exercise. So it's one of those school reports, could do better.
I was going to say, I used to get that. So I used to win the Progress Prize because it would always say could do better. And in the last term of the year, I'd shoot forward and work really hard. And so I get a Progress Prize. But when you were immersed in the business, Tim, did you find that you were really stressed and pressurized by it? And if so, how did it affect you sort of mentally, physically?
I don't know. The only thing that really stresses me, so I'm very good at keeping things in order. So at the end of every day, I make sure that I've not got an email in my inbox and I've got nothing. Quite often you just delete them or whatever, or you move them to the to-do box.
Yeah, you move them across.
But so mentally, knowing what have I got ahead of me? Am I organised? So if you're organised enough, then it takes the. But there's one thing that's really weird is that quite often a lot of people, and I remember one person, it's like every time I saw them, he'd go, God, I've got no idea how you managed to do what you're doing. And it must be really stressful. It must be. And, that was the only really stressful thing about it was people coming up to you because you think, bloody hell, I've got all this sorted. Okay. I'm on top of it. I've got all the files. I know what I'm doing. And then when people just tell you, bloody hell, I don't know what you're doing, you must be really stressed, then you're thinking, well, maybe I should be. So the stressful thing is people raising the topic and asking when actually, your coping mechanism, hopefully at a certain age, you work out what you can take on and how much more you want to do. And if you're sensible, you can ensure that your workload is what you're able to cope with.
Yeah, so true. That sort of comes with time and age, doesn't it? Experience, I think, when one's young, rushing around like a headless chicken.
And then sometimes you realise, actually, it's a bit silly, we're doing a bit too much. And then you just say, well, actually, does it have to be done next week? What is the time scale on this? Put a bit into perspective.
Do you think that's boundaries or confidence? I mean, certainly I've found that it's been confidence with me and building stronger boundaries to push back, thinking, you know what, that can wait. Yes, I know you want it tomorrow, but actually it's not a priority. Do you think that is age, experience, confidence?
I think it is. And so if I had the confidence that I've got now when I was 25, I think we'd have probably achieved our objectives, of the billion litres by now. So you do build, you build confidence, and you do that by doing things yourself, making mistakes. You do it by seeing the programme that I hate the most is The Apprentice on TV.
Oh, I quite like a bit of Alan Sugar. It amuses me.
And I just sit there and I go, if the country is looking at all those people and thinking that's what I've got to be like to be in business, then it is the absolute total opposite of how I feel people should treat people, how to get the best out of people. Do you know what I mean? I mean, It's like, just because it's like a 1980s, sort of big bang city, sort of, big business, corporate, whatever. I've got to be Gordon Gekko and, shaft people and knock them over. And, whereas the reality of it is business can be done in a sort of firm but enjoyable way where it's not all, being bitchy and horrible and,
Yeah, aggressive. I don't like that side where they sort of turn on each other. But, anyway. So, Tim, do you have a book or a song that you would like to recommend, share with the listeners?
Well, since we've been trying to flog yoghurt pots over the last 35 years or whatever it is, we've now got our own part of our own festival called Valley Fest, where we have lots of different bands coming. And last year, Travis and Goldfrapp and Deacon Blue were going to be the headliners, and hopefully, Travis and Deacon Blue are going to be there next year, and all this sort of stuff. And the one band having left school in 1980, you had the sort of the sort of late 70s, early 80s sort of punk bit. So there's a Scottish punk band called the Skids, and they got a very good song called Into the Valley, which for Yeo Valley is a pretty damn good song and fit. And I've been trying to get the band there to Valley Fest.
I was going to say, get the Skids skidding along to you guys.
I know, but it's not quite the target audience. Old punk rockers. But the good thing is that next year, the Blockheads, which was Ian Jury's...
Well, hold on, it's going to be this year, isn't it? 2021.
Absolutely. So this year, we've got Ian Jury's band, the Blockheads.
Oh, wow.
Who were on their farewell tour last year. But of course, because of all the pandemic stuff, it got cancelled. So they've decided to do another farewell tour in 2021. And therefore, we're looking to welcome the Blockheads to Valley Fest. And for me, the Blockheads and the Skids are sort of, 50-50. So because I can't have Into the Valley, I'm going to have Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll and the Blockheads.
And the joy is that we can all buy tickets to the Valley Fest, and I'm sure there will be details, or there are details on the Yeo Valley website. So, Tim, one thing that I wanted to ask you, because I like asking our guests to give a little bit of advice to people. There are obviously going to be a lot of people who are now having to rethink their career paths as a result of COVID, redundancies and all that sort of thing. How easy would it be for anyone to set up as an organic farmer? And is it commercially viable if they did? Or can it be commercial? Well, you've made it commercially viable, but for a small farm.
Getting into farming is an exceedingly capital intensive business. If you're an existing farmer, I think the growth of regenerative organic farming will be very, very strong. And I think that hopefully if the UK government sees the opportunity of our first agricultural policy since we entered the Common Agricultural Policy, so it's probably the first agricultural policy the UK have written for nearly 50 years. If the government sees the opportunity and encourage regenerative organic farming, then as existing farmers out there, I would encourage people to look at the opportunities, because if we really can farm in a way that helps reverse climate change, then farmers will be seen as part of the solution and not part of the problem, which is a really nice place to be.
Really nice place to be. And that, I think, leads me on to the sort of last bit of the show, which is talking about where you've had to have the most hope and also a time where you have had to have patience.
So I have 4 children who are marvellous children, as all parents say they are. But there is times when patience is required. But my eldest daughter, Lucy, is called Lucy Hope.
Oh, how sweet.
And I guess that is a result of, when you're starting a family, being an optimist, hope was something that we just wanted to bestow on her, really. So I guess the hope bit would be, starting a family. The patience bit is obviously going to be how long it's going to take to get to the, my life's objective, really, of helping. Yeo Valley aren't going to be processing 1 billion litres of organic milk, by the way. That's just a pipe dream. But if Yeo Valley can help encourage and nudge organic dairying to get to the billion litres, then if ever we are to achieve that, then I deserve to be patient, because that result would be more than my wildest dreams, really.
So, Tim, where can the listeners find Yeo Valley?
On the edge of the Mendips, there's a little place called Compton Martin where the River Yeo starts. It then flows out down through Blagdon Lake, and we farm on the south shore of the lake. So we welcome 50,000 visitors to visit the garden, come to the festival, go on farm tours, come to the restaurants and the cafe that we have here. So we're a real place. If people are passing by or whatever, when we return to normality, we love to show people what we're doing and how we're doing stuff. Or alternatively, you can go to various social media platforms, and there are information about what we do and how we do stuff. Or you can go to the supermarket, more importantly, pick up a pot of yogurt, milk, butter, cheese, and then there's a QR code on there. Then you can scan it with your phone, and it takes you through to films or websites about what we do. And we also put a whole load of information on the packaging, which I know that you know Perry from Big Fish quite well.
Perry is one of our fantastic guests who actually steered us to you, which was fantastic. But you also have yokens, don't you, which are sort of like tokens?
We have a range of dairy products for all of the family. So to encourage families to go, do you know what? I'm going to become a Yeo Valley advocate. I'm going to spend my 250 or my 350 pounds a year on Yeo Valley. If they do that, then they can collect the yokens, which is soon going to be digital collection via QR codes as opposed to keying in the 14-digit number. And the more yokens you collect, the more discounts you get of coming to the Valley, getting tickets for the Valley Fest, never to be missed event next year or this year. We take you to other West Country businesses in our digital farm shop, where you can buy scarves made, from the wool from the flock of sheep on the farm. You can buy duvets from Devon made with goose down. So we have a farm shop on our website that the more yokens you collect, the bigger the discounts, the better stuff you can win, and then you can come and visit us as well.
And that is why Yeo Valley, Tim and his team and his mom and his dad, late dad, they're just amazing people, real movers and shakers, because what you offer, Tim, is huge. And I just love the way that you are so true to your roots, all the way through the brand. It's phenomenal. And you've grown it to such a large scale, still holding on to your values. So I would love to thank Tim so much for being on the show. It has just been such a delight. The insights that you've shared are brilliant, and I certainly have learned heaps about dairy farming, the importance of organic soil, and loads more. So thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I will now continue to finish my crunchy, and tough having a half-eaten crunchy on your desk for half an hour, isn't it?
Well, I've got 3/4 left. Anyway, before I go, it's time for my book recommendation and quote for this episode. The book is The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. It's a story about two struggling strangers who meet an eccentric tycoon who becomes their secret mentor. It's compelling. I don't rise at 5 a.m. I do get up early, because I love the stillness, but it is a really, really good read. There's a lot that you can learn from it. And the quote is, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. And that's Albus Dumbledore, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. A huge thank you for finding the show. I hope you enjoyed the chat. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest episode. And if you're enjoying the show, it would be truly fab if you could rate and review it, and also share it with any mates who you think would enjoy it. Any book recommendations, quotes, songs can be found in the show notes and on the website too. Happy 2021. May it bring sparkle, inspiration and laughter.
Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope. Join the conversation at hopeandpatience.co.uk. Find Amelia on Facebook at Hope and Patience, or on Twitter and Instagram at Amelia_Rope.